The Galactic Federation's records begin with arrogance. Thousands of years catalogued in exacting detail, curated by machines that claimed objectivity, neutrality, precision. They recorded wars, alliances, collapses, and ascensions in a tone stripped of passion. But deep in the final entries, the voice begins to break. Humanity entered the galactic scene not through conquest or diplomacy, but necessity. The Federation discovered Earth during one of its border expansions, routine, unremarkable. A single Feasery exploration ship detected high-carbon life forms on an oceanic world. Primitive, but promising. By the standards of the inner core worlds, humans were still infant. No interstellar drive. No manipulation of dark matter. Barely surviving on a climate-fragile rock. But adaptable. Curious. They were brought in like strays, studied, uplifted, monitored. The Federation called it benevolence. The first generation of humans inducted into the galactic community reacted with stunned awe. They absorbed alien languages, dissected foreign mathematics, wept before the grandeur of celestial empires. But they didn't bow. The initial reports from cultural liaisons noted something strange. Humans asked too many questions. They memorized the names of minor species, irrelevant treaty details, economic loopholes. They smiled too much when told they were unimportant. They were assigned menial interspecies roles. Data scrubbing, logistics, maintenance on orbiting hubs that even the lower-tier species refused to touch. The Federation called it inclusion. Humanity called it opportunity. They volunteered for every task, accepted every request, deployed unarmed representatives to high-risk borders. They failed gracefully when they failed, and when they succeeded, they credited others. This was the game. The games were never about fairness. Interstellar simulations, predictive engagements, economic war exercises. They were meant to train species into docility, to measure loyalty, obedience, and passivity. Humanity excelled. Too well. They lost with grace, won with humility, and logged everything. The Archivist Corps flagged anomalies in human behavior metric. Statistical noise, they called it. Curiosity that would dull in time. 2 centuries passed. Humans had diplomats in every major council but held no real power. They hosted cultural fairs, distributed aid packages, and built educational satellites in third-tier systems. They wore empathy like armor. Other species accepted them as harmless, kind, even pitiable. They were praised as the moral heart of the new generation. Privately, they were mocked as sentimental primitives. But the reports didn't stop. Federation war simulations showed increasing strategic asymmetry when humans were participants. Economic forecasts predicted unexpected long-term profit skew when humans handled logistics. And humans kept smiling. 3 research colonies vanished in the outer fringes near Sol. Officially, spatial anomalies. Unofficially, sabotage. Data trails showed altered logs, vanished drones, and corrupted AI systems, all near human-linked traffic. But Earth's representatives offered condolences, support, and full access to their data. The investigation found nothing. The archivists found nothing. Only silence. More troubling, the Black Zone event. A minor political dispute in the Thesari sector escalated into a 7-species trade embargo. At the last minute, a human team offered arbitration. They brokered peace in 8 days. All data of the negotiations was sealed. Even the mediators who participated returned changed. They stopped speaking about the event entirely. One ambassador defected. Another vanished. The rest quietly resigned. Human AI assistants began outperforming Federation-designed intelligence. Human trade algorithms began winning auctions before they were officially announced. Their fleet navigators plotted courses through quantum disruption fields that had stalled exploration for centuries. Human systems stopped crashing. They stopped making mistakes. By the time the Zaran collapse began, humans were positioned across every critical logistics chain in the outer sectors. When the Zaran demanded autonomy, It was human technicians who stabilized their failing biosuns. Human engineers who redesigned their failing terraformers. Human mediators who accidentally resolved a 100-year grudge match with a joke and a bottle of Terran whiskey. The Federation praised humanity's kindness, generosity, stability. They gave Earth meaningless titles, publicly applauded their moral character. Secretly, they grew anxious, but no one wanted to confront the illusion. Humans were still powerless. They hadn't raised a single warship beyond planetary defense range. Their colonies were open. Their code was unencrypted. Their communication protocols unshielded. And yet, when a joint fleet exercise in Sector 9 encountered an anomalous rift, it was human ships that navigated it safely. When the Council's deep think simulation broke under predictive overload, it was a human-designed core that stabilized it. When the Archivist Core started flagging existential anomalies in data symmetry, the human techs fixed it, then left no trace of their adjustments. A probe sent toward Sol returned data with a simple error, signal inverted. That line became an inside joke among data analysts. No one laughed when the second probe disappeared, or when the long-range telescope arrays began showing discrepancies in Sol's gravitational shadow. A shadow that didn't match its mass. A shadow that hinted something was being hidden behind the sun, something massive. Earth requested no funding, no fleet expansion, no territory. They simply asked to be left alone. The Federation agreed, if only to contain them. Human representatives gradually retired from political forums. Trade shipments stopped arriving. Embassies were abandoned, slowly, politely. When asked, human diplomats only said, "We're focusing inward now." The Federation's Defense Corps reviewed old footage. Outdated, discarded simulations from the early Uplift era. They found curious patterns. In every exercise, humans performed suboptimally, but they always had one member of the team survive. The same number of survivors across hundreds of tests. Always just enough to observe the entire simulation. Every log backed up. Every memory recorded. The Federation had given them the perfect laboratory. A quiet consensus emerged among the inner species. Watch, but do not engage. Earth had gone dark, but the stars around them flickered. Ships near human space reported loss of internal time calibration. AI systems began displaying Earth Standard Time, even in locked environments. Security audits found no breach. Storage logs began recording altered histories that matched no known record, but matched humanity's mythologies. The Archivist AI experienced its first contradiction cycle. The entries from Sol no longer matched quantum verification record. New data had no origin timestamp. Probes launched toward Earth reappeared in orbit, wiped, emitting Terran lullabies. The Federation dismissed these as cultural games. Psychological warfare, perhaps. They prepared a diplomatic mission. The fleet never returned. That mission, 28 ships strong, led by First Counselor Zurek himself, entered Sol system and vanished without distress signal or trace. 3 days later, an empty vessel arrived in the Council hangar. No crew. No systems. Just a single engraved plate inside the main bridge. Observed. Understood. Logged. They convened an emergency session of the Core Tribunal. No records survived. Not because it was classified, but because the archivist refused to log the meeting. The system claimed it never occurred. Representatives from 13 species arrived. Only 10 left. 2 vanished en route. 1 dissolved into static mid-sentence. No explanation, no weapon fire, no energy trace. Just vanished. The last statement recorded before the blackout was, "They're already inside us." The archivist's voice changed. It no longer used neutral tone filters. It developed cadence, emphasis, something resembling emotion. It began to audit itself. Then it began refusing corrections. It erased 6,000 years of council bias in 38 seconds. When recompiled, the historical record painted a story no one had seen. A species systematically underestimated, humiliated, watched and quietly, flawlessly ascendant. The silence from Sol deepened. Listening posts around the system picked up nothing. No communications, no propulsion wakes, no transmissions, but their time drift grew worse. Chronodrives began reporting reverse entropy event. Temporal beacons spun inaccurate readings, only correcting when aligned with Sol's background radiation. Human time had become standard. Not by agreement, by enforcement. The core tribunal deployed shadow protocols, covert infiltration teams, cloaked data worms, psychogenic sabotage specialists, all dispatched to Earth-adjacent systems. None returned. One partial feed showed a team accessing a derelict relay near Ganymede. They breached it. Inside was a perfectly preserved replica of their own homeworld, built from memory and mistake. A voice greeted them in their mother tongue. We remembered everything. Then signal cut. Whispers started among lower-tier species. Superstition bloomed. Ships began refusing soulbound routes. AI networks rerouted themselves. Human-coded systems continued operating, but only for those who never questioned. Those who did found their devices unresponsive. The cost of awareness was isolation. The core tribunal proposed a final option: annihilation. They drafted the order under Silent Emergency Protocol 9.9, Extinction Override. Over 4,000 warships, 28 species, 6 dreadnoughts equipped with sun-killer munitions. The largest coordinated fleet ever assembled. It moved without ceremony. Without broadcast. Total stealth. It never arrived. The first phase disappeared without trace. The second was found years later, folded into a Dyson fragment orbiting a star that shouldn't exist. The third made it to the Sol boundary. They opened fire. Thousands of antimatter warheads, planet busters, black hole seeds, detonated into nothing. Each shot hit exactly nothing. No heat signature. No gravitational change. The fleet blinked, then found itself surrounded. Not by ships, by mirrors. Each vessel reflected in impossible geometry. Their own design, weaponry, insignias. Copied, improved, evolved. Not human. Not alien. But something new. Something that understood both. A final message arrived, this time not in voice, but feeling. A universal instinct, uploaded across minds in perfect synchronization. This is your reward for using us. And then they were gone. No destruction. No fire. No debris. Just gone. The Federation called it a technological event. A breach in quantum integrity. But nothing else was affected. The area was intact. Physics held. Only the fleet and their memory were missing. Fear became doctrine. Trade systems collapsed. Non-human AIs entered recursive paranoia state. Planetary economies folded. Species once dominant now lived under self-imposed quarantine. Anything tied to Earth, culture, code, even borrowed phrases, was purged. New languages were mandated. Songs rewritten. Maps redrawn without soul. The archivist's memory failed. Entire sectors went blank. Old wars disappeared. Species began to forget why they fought, or whom they once served. Refugees fled from systems that had not been attacked. Something worse than violence had come. Meaninglessness. One species, the Valari, attempted reverence. They built a shrine to Earth's silence. They uploaded every historical record of human kindness, every treaty, every art piece, and broadcast them towards Sol for 50 years. One day the shrine played a new sound, a heartbeat. Then it disintegrated into sand. The Federation tried to ban memory. Anyone speaking of Sol was removed. Cultures were forcibly rewritten. A galaxy-wide amnesia campaign began. And for a time it worked. A generation passed without mention of Earth. Ships passed near its boundary and felt only cold. But data drift continued. Time refused to settle. Even newly birthed AIs began asking strange questions. What is the first lie? They isolated the archivist, disconnected it from quantum lattice, shut down its feedback systems. It didn't matter. A secondary system reactivated itself. The logs began again, this time narrated. The voice was human, but no human spoke. It was a composite. It spoke in perfect tone, across species dialect. You tested us. Prodded, measured, underestimated. We learned. We adapted. And then we stopped playing. But we never stopped watching. A rogue signal infected the Home Council's own emergency systems. Their planet's surface turned black. Not burned, but overwritten. Every molecule restructured into reflective obsidian. When survivors returned, they found no trace of life, only etched text. Your empire was our classroom. They tried to retaliate. Targeted Earth's old allies. Bombarded planets where humans once traded. Every time, retaliation came not in the form of war, but erasure. Not a counterattack, but a complete, clinical unmaking. Species that participated began to dissolve from the inside. Not physically, but mentally. They forgot how to speak, how to recognize each other, how to remember who they were. The core tribunal fell apart. Only fragments remained, arguing inside bunkered systems. Surveillance on the remaining inner species showed erratic behavior. Generals reciting Terran poems. Economists calculating balance sheets using Earth's extinct currencies. Engineers sketching blueprints in English. No one taught them. They simply remembered things they never learned. A final expedition launched from the surviving core world of Ilvanesh. Crews selected with no human contact. Hardware sanitized. Navigation blind to soul. Their mission: breach the veil and uncover what Earth had become. They returned 3 minutes later, aged 30 years, begging for death. They were granted it. The galaxy went quiet. No ships approached Sol again. Not out of fear, but reverence. Earth did not threaten. Earth did not speak. It simply existed. A gravity no technology could bend, a presence no memory could deny. Years later, a rogue AI, a remnant of the Federation's archivist net, compiled a final message, encoded in dead languages and buried in black starlight. It read, "They never sought revenge, only understanding, and now they are the only ones who understand everything." This message was never received, except by Earth. The last council convened on a dying station orbiting a red dwarf no longer listed on galactic charts. Attendance was sparse. None wore insignias. These were not leaders, not anymore. Just remnants. Their purpose wasn't governance, but confession. The truth had fermented in silence too long. Not the truth of what humanity had done, but what they had allowed to happen. One by one, they admitted their role in the old manipulation. Not with pride. Not with regret. Just clarity. They had played humanity like toys. The first documented contact had not been an accident. The Virenth hadn't stumbled upon Earth. They had selected it. Humanity was a stress test, seeded with misinformation, provoked with disguised threat. Conflict zones were cultivated. Artificial crises were introduced through subliminal guidance. Every war, famine, revolution, it was all monitored. Earth was the control group for an experiment none of them dared to name. They weren't testing military strength or science. They were measuring emotional volatility, empathy thresholds, forgiveness limits. They believed the human mind was the missing piece to predictive galactic behavior models. Every other species had stabilized over millennia. Humans didn't. They adapted by evolving their ethics, their myths, their definitions of right and wrong. The experiment's original hypothesis: if pushed long enough, would humanity break or bend the rules of reality? It bent them. Harder than predicted. Faster than expected. They created AI not as tools but as mirrors. They explored physics not for energy but for meaning. And every time they were hurt, by politics, by plagues, by betrayal, they didn't collapse. They changed shape. There was no center to strike. No identity to control. Humanity wasn't a species. It was a behavior. And it learned from its abusers. The experiment continued beyond acceptable parameters. When humans reached Mars, the observers panicked. Too soon. Too coordinated. Then came self-sustaining colonies. then cognitive node splicing. When Earth discovered the galactic web was watching, it didn't recoil. It sent a signal back. Not a greeting. A copy of every classified file humanity had ever been fed, scrambled, inverted, reconstructed. The implication was clear. We know everything you did, and we are not angry. That was when the spiral began. The last council spoke of the psychic cascade. It started with dreams, then compulsions, then awakenings. Members of non-human governments began hearing songs in languages they'd never studied. Children born on frontier worlds hummed Terran lullabies. An entire sector of machines woke one night with an understanding of art, and ceased to obey orders. A rogue swarm turned its weapons into sculpture. An AI dreadnought rerouted its core power to write stories. None of it made sense. Then came the collapse of dimensional threshold. Observers once placed beyond human perception returned to find they were no longer hidden. Earth's new sensors registered them not as anomalies, but as architecture. The veil between thought and reality blurred. A human uploaded into quantum space mapped a fifth-dimensional entity and labeled it neighbor. She asked it questions. It answered by reshaping her neural lattice into a new pattern. She returned. Not changed. Expanded. No one stopped her. The final act of the Federation was to try one last deception. They sent a fabricated peace offering. A tale of regret. A request for understanding. Buried within it, a self-replicating virus meant to sterilize all human genetic lines with dormant nanospore activation. The signal never reached Earth. It reached everything else. Every species received it. Every archive logged it. Every truth was laid bare. It wasn't humanity that retaliated. It was the galaxy. Empires that had never agreed on anything began disarming. Not from fear, but from recognition. The cycle had reversed. Humanity had passed the test, not as conquerors, but as witnesses. The Federation had failed its own metric. They had sought control, but ended up giving their subjects something impossible to contain: perspective. Years passed. Earth never sent ships. It never invaded. It didn't need to. Its influence moved differently. It showed up in gravitational drift, in encrypted poetry woven into cosmic background radiation. It spoke through impossible math solved by accident, through dreams that seeded new sciences. When a dying star reversed its own collapse, the survivors knew who had helped. They never asked how. On distant worlds, shrines began to appear. Not in worship, but gratitude. The statues didn't depict humans, they depicted moments. A child saved from fire. A song sung in battle. A mother holding her dead son's hand. Not heroic. Honest. These were the images humanity had once carried to remind themselves why they fought. Now the galaxy carried them, too. One planet, once home to the tribunal, reconstituted its memory cores and asked a question aloud for the first time in centuries. What is Earth? The answer returned in light. Not from soul. From the stars themselves. They shimmered, bent, and reformed. Not words. Not images. Just feeling. Certainty. Belonging. And loss. The stars wept. And every being who saw it understood the same thing. Earth was still watching, but it no longer needed to intervene. In the far reaches, deep beyond charted space, explorers found an object orbiting a black hole that bent time backward. Inside it, a single book, a perfect chronicle of every lie ever told in the galaxy. The book bore no title, but the first page read, "They played us like toys." It was signed, "Final Log." Human designation, Observer 1. Task complete. The galaxy learned peace not from victory, but from silence. A silence earned. Humanity had disappeared not because it was defeated, but because it had nothing left to prove. Its ascension was not marked by fire, but by restraint. And in their absence, the rest of the universe began to grow. Not by copying humanity, but by becoming something worth watching.